What up peeps, in this video I'm reviewing this incredibly compact, incredibly low cost 60 watt video light from Andoer to see if it's the best compact budget video light you can buy. I'll be going through all the features before we do a comparison between this, the SL60W from Godox and the Aperture 120D Mark II to see how it stacks up. Included with the light is a mini reflector, and for that reflector you also get a soft dome diffuser which you can attach to the front in a sort of awkward condom way, and that just diffuses the light for you. You also get a hand grip that attaches to the bottom of the light into the standard tripod screw mount, and this also has a clip-on battery mount for the very common Sony MP battery, so you can use this light away from mains power, but it also does come included with a mains power adapter. You also get a remote, making this perfect if you want to set up the lights somewhere semi-permanently but hard to reach, maybe for someone like a streamer or YouTuber. Now usually this style of light has a Bowens mount on the front. Now this is just a standardized way of attaching light modifiers. Because it's so much smaller, it has its own proprietary mount called a ZY mount, which actually also features on the Ewin Molus lights. I think I've said that right. Fortunately, they do make a Bowens adapter as well as some light modifiers. They make a mini softbox and a mini diffuser similar to one that comes in this package, but unfortunately Andoer don't seem to offer any additional light modifiers. The mount on this is plastic, so obviously a bit of a cost-cutting measure and won't be as durable as metal, although it is quite a dense plastic. So other than light modifiers, your other options are bouncing this, for example, off a white wall, or using an umbrella, which is what I'm doing now, and that's what I do when I'm out and about with this small video light. The battery mount that comes with it does have a hole for an umbrella to slide into. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a screw for tightening it down, so you won't be able to lean this too far forward without the umbrella sliding out. The rest of the build is metal, and inside you can see quite a large metal heatsink, which is where most of the weight for this comes from, but don't worry, it's still incredibly light. So let's talk through some of the features before we go through some lighting demonstrations, although as one lighting demonstration I have been using this for the entire video so far. As you can see here, this is the big umbrella that I have set up, and behind it you will see the little Andoer 60 watt light. Currently set to about 40% brightness in my room, and I've been using this for the whole video and will use for the whole video. And in fact I also used it in a previous, less popular YouTube video by bouncing it against the wall in my office. Obviously the back is where the controls are housed. You have buttons to change the colour temperature. You can go down from 2800K all the way up to 6800K. You have a brightness control up and down. This goes up in 1% increments, but there's also a button that will change from 50, 75, 100 and 25% and cycle through those brightnesses. There's obviously a power button, a fan button which limits the unit to 30% but turns off the fan. And there's an FX button for the 8 built-in effects, although because this isn't an RGB video light, the effects are pretty simple and you have a lot of flashing effects and a couple of candle type effects. So first let's compare the light output. We'll compare it to the Godox 60 watt light here, and as we can see it's not as bright as the Godox 60 watt even though it's 60 watt rated. This is probably down to the LED in the Andoer being bi-colour, although they call it tri-colour, so it's not going to be as bright as a single colour chip like the Godox. I also use one of my smart plugs to measure the power draw from the Andoer and the Godox, and also the Aperture that we'll be testing with in a moment. And the Andoer did pull around 60 watts, the Godox actually pulled 80 watts, and the Aperture pulled 175 watts. This was all on their brightest settings. Now for some real world tests. These are all straight out of camera. I just set the camera to daylight balanced just so we could see what the lights were doing colour wise, and so the camera wasn't correcting for any colour shifts. The Aperture is advertised at 5500K, the Godox is advertised at 5600K, and I've set the Andoer up at 5500K to match the two. This is the Andoer at 75% without the reflector on, just straight behind the umbrella for diffusion. Aperture light, but this time with the reflector taken out, so we have a bigger spread of light behind the diffuser. Here is the Godox without the reflector behind the umbrella on 35%. This is the Andoer light set up using the reflector with a umbrella in front. This is the Aperture light at 60% without the reflector attached behind an umbrella for some diffusion. And this is the Godox light without the reflector behind the umbrella, with a much sort of wider spread, just the LED. From these tests, I think the thing that stood out most to me is how closely the Andoer matches the much more expensive Aputure light. I think the Aputure is definitely the most neutral light. It certainly doesn't sway as much into the pink or into the green compared to the two. I think the Andoer is maybe a little bit warmer with a very faint hint of green, and the Godox light is quite heavily red. However, with a bit of colour correction, you can match these pretty closely. I moved the reds quite a bit on the Godox to get them to match, and they changed the colour of the red in my t-shirt. Then as a final test, we also have the option, of course, with the Andoer, because it's colour adjustable, to try out the warmer side of the LED, the 2800K. I've matched it in camera at that colour temperature, so this is what it looks like. Usually LED lights perform much better on the warmer end of their spectrum compared to the cooler end, so this is a good test for that. Obviously, having the ability to match the colour temperature to your surroundings, whether you're out in daylight or you're in quite a warm tungsten lit room, is quite advantageous and really useful, I've found, in my sort of day-to-day corporate work where I don't know what the lighting is going to be like. Now, I did mention a heatsink earlier, which obviously means there's going to be a fan in this to keep it cool. I'll compare it now with the Godox and the Aputure so you can see what the noise is like. This is the Andoer light. It's to my right, about a metre away. Then this is the sound from the Godox. And now the Aputure fan is on. And this is the sound of the Andoer light stood directly next to it, less than half a metre. Of course, it does have the fanless mode, which will drop it down to 30%. This is the sound from the Aputure stood directly next to it, about less than half a metre. As you can see from those tests, the fan noise is a little noisier than I would have preferred, but obviously it is nice that you do have the option to set this to 30% brightness and turn the fans off. There are a lot of mid-range but more expensive options on the market that will come with a higher build quality, but also an apparent higher output of light quality. This light is rated at CRI 90+, and most are rated about 95+. However, the CRI measurement is quite an outdated way of measuring colour quality now from lights. It was originally designed for light bulbs and how the human eye reacts to them, not camera sensors. It's useful as a rough guide, but as we've seen, the 90+ rated Andoer fared much nicer in our tests than the 95 rated Godox. There is another standard that a lot of manufacturers quote, which is the TLCI rating standard, but there is an even better one, which is newer and often not on a lot of manufacturers' pages, called the SSI standard. Sorry about all these acronyms, I just wanted to mention that CRI isn't a great way of telling if a light is great for video or photography production, and you should really look for SSI if you can. There's a great video that really summarises all these colour standards by the DP Journey. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Moving on from all these acronyms, if you decide to buy this light, I got it from AliExpress, where I got it for around £40 or $50. You can buy it directly from Amazon for around £63, currently they have a 10% off code, which makes this cost price wise very hard to compete with. Spend more and there are small LED COB lights from the likes of Smallrig, Amaran, Zhuin, Godox, Newer, Nanlite, the list goes on. So for someone on a really tight budget, I don't think you could do much better than this small video light. And in fact, for $50, you could buy a small kit for the same cost of one of those other competitors' lights. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and I'll see you next time.